If you want to create interactive and dynamic web applications, then JavaScript is an absolute requirement. So in today's video, we'll go over everything you need to know to get started writing JavaScript. So what exactly is JavaScript? Well, JavaScript is an interpreted language that for years has been the only language that you can write inside of a web browser. And for years it has grown and evolved to support the ever-changing web that we know today. So how exactly do we get started writing JavaScript? Well, as I said before, JavaScript can be written inside of the browser, so there's not much to our normal HTML layout that we really need to change. So I've got a basic HTML layout here, and this is what you would normally see for a basic starting application, and then I've got an empty CSS file. We're not going to be using that today. But all we need to do to write JavaScript is we need to create a script tag, just like that. And that script tag, in between those opening and closing script tags, is where we can write our JavaScript. Now before we can start writing JavaScript code, we need to understand exactly how we can include it in the browser. As you can see here, I've added the script tag at the bottom of the body tag. Now why exactly did I do that? Well, whenever you're writing JavaScript, everything else inside of the browser needs to be loaded before your JavaScript executes. And this is simply because if you're accessing something inside of the browser, say I'm accessing that div tag, well, the browser needs to know about it before I can access it inside of my JavaScript. So if I write JavaScript that's going to access that div tag, I need that div tag to be loaded in the browser before I can access it in my JavaScript. Generally, you'll see programmers write it at the very bottom like this, and I'll show you another trick how you can include it as well at the very top here in just a minute. Now, let's write our very first bit of JavaScript code. So I'm going to, inside of the script tag, we are going to write alert. Just like this, and we're going to give it open and closing parentheses just like that. And inside of these opening and closing parentheses, we're actually going to do something a little bit different. We're going to put double quotation marks like that, and I'll explain all of this here in a bit. We're just going to write our very first hello world application. So inside of those double quotation marks, we're just going to say hello world. Just like that, and we're going to save that. Now, whenever we go over to our browser, we're going to get a pop-up that says, Hello World. The website says, Hello World, and then we can dismiss it just by clicking the OK button. And that is it. Congratulations, you've just written your very first JavaScript script. Now, let's break it down and see what we actually did here. Now, this alert right here, this is what's called a built-in method in JavaScript, and it allows us to do exactly what we just did of alert someone of something on the page. So whenever you call this alert method, it's going to take whatever you pass in this case it was a string containing hello world, and it's going to display that as an alert on the page. So now that we've written our very first bit of JavaScript code, let's go back a little bit and talk about exactly how the browser is reading this JavaScript code and how we can improve on this just a little bit better. Now, as I said before, the browser actually needs to load all of the HTML before it can start executing the JavaScript. And that's why a lot of times you'll see this script tag included at the very end of the body tag, so that way everything is loaded before it starts executing the JavaScript. And this is what's called an inline script tag. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with writing your JavaScript in an inline script tag just like we have here, but there's a slightly easier and cleaner way of doing it while also fulfilling the fact that we need to load the JavaScript last. So let's go ahead and explore that option. I'm just going to go ahead and comment out this script tag, and you can just comment this out just like you would any other HTML element. And then we're going to head up here to the head, and we're going to include a script tag here. Now, this script tag is not really meant for you to be writing JavaScript inside of it. Instead, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using it as a link from an external JavaScript file to be included inside of this file. But we don't have an external JavaScript file, so let's create one. So to create an external JavaScript file, all we have to do is create a new file, and we can name it whatever we want, but it just has to end in .js. So I'm going to create a script just like that, and I'm going to end it in .js. Just like that, and that's going to create our external JavaScript file. Now we can write all of our JavaScript code inside of this file without having to clutter up our HTML file. But before we start writing JavaScript in our new script file, we actually have to go back to the HTML file and include a couple more things. So let's head back to the HTML file, and on this script tag we're actually going to give this a property, and this property is going to tell the HTML exactly where we have the script file stored. So we're going to give this a source attribute, and the source attribute is going to tell it exactly where it's stored at. So we're going to, in the current directory, look for our script file, which is script.js. Now we also need to include how we're going to make this run last, because right now it's in the head and it's going to run before everything. And luckily HTML gives us a small little keyword that we can add to this so that it will run last. And so outside of the source, we are actually going to include the defer keyword, and this is going to tell the HTML file, wait to run this. Don't actually run this right now. We're going to defer it to run at the end after everything else has been loaded. Now we can save this, and we can now go back to our script tag and we can write our alert again. So if we write our alert, and then we can just say hello, just like that, and you can see that we are now alerting from the script file. Now this is my personal preference, and it's the personal preference of a lot of developers as well, to write your JavaScript in an external JavaScript file just like this. And from here on out, I'm pretty much always going to be using the external JavaScript file. It's very rare that I actually write an inline script file, just because it clutters it up, the HTML, it clutters it up a bit, and it just doesn't make it look very clean. So I always like to use an external script file. But now that we've got this set up, this is the way I'm probably going to be doing it for just about everything from now on. But now that we know how to include JavaScript both inline and using an external script, let's actually look more at the JavaScript side of things and exactly how we can start writing the JavaScript. Now to understand JavaScript, we actually need to understand primitive types. Now what exactly is a primitive type? Well, a primitive type is the very basic building blocks of every programming language basically, and JavaScript has 7 of them, and these include number, string, boolean, null, undefined, big int, and symbol. Now those last 2 we really don't care too much about. Those are more of an advanced topic, and we'll go over those at some point. We're just not going to dive deep into those in this video. But the other 5 we do care about, and we are going to go over here right now. Now the very first one, number, is exactly as it sounds. It's just a number, and these numbers, they don't have any special syntax that you have to include. You can just add them as regular numbers. So if I just wanted to alert a number, just, I don't know, 42, we can alert a number 42, and we can just pass it in just like that, and it's recognized as the number 42. And if we save that, you can see it's going to alert 42, just as we specified over here. Now a string is actually going to be a string of characters, and we can include just about any character inside that we want. We can include letters, we can include numbers, we can include special characters, anything we really want we can include inside of a string. Now to create a string, we've actually already seen how we do that. So to create the string, we're going to use double quotation marks, and you can actually use single quotation marks as well, and that will work perfectly fine as well. And inside, as I said, we can use letters, numbers, whatever. So I can say, hello, my number is 42. And that whole thing is a string. Now, a Boolean is going to be a true or a false, and these are the only two values that a Boolean can be. It's either true or it's false. So true and false are written just like this. They're actually keywords, and they are of type Boolean. So if we save that, we can see it outputs true, and we could do the same with false. False is also, just like true, a keyword, and it does not need to have quotation marks around it. In fact, if you put it in quotation marks, it will no longer be a Boolean, rather it will be a string. So if you put false or true inside of quotation marks, it will not be a Boolean, it will actually be a string. But if you don't, these are actually keywords that represent whether something is true or whether something is false. And the last two are going to be null and undefined. Now, both of these are actually very similar in meaning, but they are perceived in different ways. So what I mean by that is null and undefined both mean that there's no value, nothing exists there. But the difference is that the programmer generally will set something to null, and the browser will generally set something to undefined. So if you do not define something, you can set that to null as no value whatsoever, and if there's something that's not defined, the browser will say that this is undefined. You don't want to, as the programmer, set something to undefined, and the browser generally won't set anything to null. That way you can kind of understand which is which. Null is set by the programmer, and undefined is actually set by the browser. And the way that we write these is exactly like the Booleans. We can set something to null, and if we save that, it's perceived as the value null, not just the word null, but the value null. And also with undefined, it's actually a keyword as well, and it's actually of value undefined rather than just the word undefined. Now, a lot of times whenever you're writing JavaScript, you have to try to figure out what is going wrong in this code that I'm writing. And a lot of times you want to be able to see what is going on inside of your code. And one of the easiest ways to do that without using a debugger is actually to be using the console. Now, we've actually seen the console, but we've never actually used it. So let's take a look at the console. So if we go over to the browser, we right click, hit inspect, then we're going to be presented with our DevTools. And inside of our DevTools, there's actually a tab here that says console. And this is where all of our JavaScript, we can output anything we want to the console, and any errors or anything we get inside of our JavaScript is actually going to show up inside of the console as well. So if you have anything in your console right now, don't worry too much about it. You can just click the little clear button here and it'll get rid of everything that's in our console. And let's actually write a log to the console, so that way we can output something to the console. So to output something to the console, we're going to go back, and I'm actually going to remove that alert. And to output something to the console, we are going to use the Console.log. Just like this, and we're going to use parentheses at the end there. And anything we pass inside of these parentheses will now be logged out to the console. So I could pass in a number of 42, and if I save that, you can see that 42 has shown up in the console. And we could output strings as well. We could output hello in the console. And if we save that, you can see now we have hello in the console. It's being output to the console. And the console actually has more uses than just that. We can actually write JavaScript code inside of the console. So if we wanted to add numbers together, we could say 42 plus 3, there we go, and it's going to output 45. So 42 plus 3 is going to output 45. And we can actually output strings as well. So we could say hello, and it's going to output hello in the console. And that is the basics of everything you need to know to get started writing JavaScript. Now, don't worry, this was a lot, but this is just the very basics, and this is stuff that you're going to need to know to go further in JavaScript. So We will be using these concepts a lot more in future videos, but until then, if you did like the video, make sure you slap a like on it, check out the full playlist, link is right next to me, make sure you subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.